Welcome back to the Body Literacy Podcast. Isabelle Friend joins us for an enlightening conversation on all things water in this episode. As a water ambassador, Isabelle shares her vast knowledge on the science and spirituality of water. If you're only familiar with water's molecular composition, get ready for some serious water enlightenment. You may understand water to be not only the source of life, but source consciousness itself by the end of the show. Isabelle sheds light on water's practical applications for health, hydration, and biology, empowering tactics for watershed guardianship and ecological activism, esoteric and subtle insights of ancient indigenous water wisdom, and the heady scientific discoveries of cutting-edge water research. Isabelle has a comprehensive knowledge base and water store you can visit at waterislife.love. Welcome to the show, Isabelle.
Thanks so much for having me, Jen. I'm happy to be here.
I am so excited to have you here. I've listened to numerous interviews you've done in the past, and your wealth of knowledge on, in particular, the intersection of science and spirituality when it comes to water as perhaps the medium to bridge that divide is so fascinating. And I've been interested in water for a while, but earlier this summer, I spent some time on a Caribbean island that had some volcanic hot springs. And there is just something so magical about that, but I don't even think it's magic. I think it's science that we just don't completely understand at this point in time. And I think that we're at this really interesting junction in time where the ancient wisdom of the past is combining with modern science in a way that I think we're going to see things accelerate and advance in an exponential way that we haven't seen in the past. And I really think that, nature is the perfect scientist, and she has had millennia upon millennia of time to produce the perfect environment for us to live and thrive in. And unfortunately, I think modern science to this point has kind of raged against that and has tried to outsmart or dominate nature rather than to look to her and model what she's been doing and help humanity evolve from that perspective. So from that point, can we kind of just jump in and you can kind of give us your background on how it is you got so interested in water science and where that intersects with where we're going in terms of nature and the advancement of humanity?
Absolutely. This is such a juicy place to start. So I love all of that and couldn't agree with you more on everything that you mentioned. One of my favorite quotes about water comes from an author named Lauren Isley, who said that if there's magic on this planet, it's contained in water. And like you said, maybe it's magic or maybe it's just science that we haven't discovered the terms for yet or the laws behind them yet. But I really think that magic and science, or spirituality and science, are two languages to describe the same phenomena. And I really love discovering the ways in which water translates both of those languages. Because whether we're looking at ancient indigenous water wisdom teachings and creation stories and practices and rituals and that kind of thing, or we're looking at the world's major religions and their holy water practices and their scriptural teachings about water. On the spiritual side of things, water plays such a central role in every aspect of a spiritual devotee's life, from birth to baptism to death rituals to coming of age rituals and initiatory rites and all of these different things. And then on the scientific side of things, water is at the cutting edge of absolutely everything. Like you mentioned, we have to consider water as we step forward into this new phase of humanity. And I would say we have to consider water first and foremost, because water is life and holds the keys to life's toughest questions. And whether we're talking about the science of climatology, we're discovering that It's actually the depletion of the hydrological cycle at the root of the climatological issues, and the replenishment of hydrological cycles that is their remedy, their fastest remedy, far faster than carbon remediation and that sort of thing.
Right.
Or whether we're talking about health and biology and medicine, well, we are bodies of water, 70% water by volume, but 99.92% water molecules if you do a molecular count. And what we're finding is dehydration is at the root of every single disease, and rehydration, strategic, intelligent rehydration, not just drinking more water, is at the heart of healing. And that there are many different kinds of water that are being discovered that are actually used as medicines. And in fact, water is nature's primary medicine, you know, whether we're talking about economics or sociology or politics or any of these different things that we consider sciences, you know, water holds the keys to all of these as well. So there's this really special way that she's able to speak every language. She's the universal thing that we have more in common than anything else. She's what weaves us into our environment, into our watershed. She's what makes us an integral part of the ecosystem in which we live, and also of the greater human family, as all of us are just drops of water vibrating at different frequencies.
Oh, I love that. I love that. You kind of touched on hydration a minute ago, and Wilhelm Reich is one of my favorites. I'm not sure if he was considered a doctor or a psychoanalyst or what his official title was, but he had talked a lot about how desertification of the earth parallels desertification of the body.
Yes.
What is I think people think drinking water means hydration, and that's not really the case at all. What is the difference between just drinking water and hydrating our bodies?
That's a really good question. So drinking water is basically just irrigation. It goes through the digestive tract, and then depending on how high quality the water is and how primed your body is to absorb it, you may or may not absorb any of that water. You might just end up peeing it out, and it could strip minerals and take energy with it along the way, which is ultimately dehydrating in the long run. So I know it sounds counterintuitive to say that some kinds of water are dehydrating, but it's true, because our understanding of hydration, at least in the mainstream, is so limited. But thankfully, there have been a lot of amazing doctors and scientists and naturalists and people who have devoted their lives to studying the magic intersection of water and our crystalline water bodies. And I love that you brought up Reich, because he was so brilliant. I love his work so much, his work on orgone energy, and how water itself in nature and in our bodies is an accumulator of orgone energy. And there's always this mirroring of the internal and the external, right? As above, so below, as within, so without. And in fact, I have an entire course on this called Internal Oceans, that is basically just walking people through the ways that our biology is mirrored in the earth, and that all of the external hydrological cycles of the earth exist within us as well. And if we want to really understand true health and vitality and thriving as a body of water, it's important to recognize how water functions and flows within us, and that it's not just, you know, when we say that we're dehydrated, it's not just that we haven't been drinking enough water. It could be that water is pooling in the wrong places in our body and isn't flowing and transitioning well between the different hydrological cycles, the different watersheds within us. Like, for example, can your blood and your lymph flow easily between one another? Can your blood easily transition to cerebrospinal fluid and back? Are you pooling water, you know, in your ankles with edema? Like, all of these considerations of the flow of water, just like the health of a watershed depends on, you know, can that water rise from the aquifer to the spring, to the river, to the lake. You know, it's about making sure there's plenty of flow, there's no stagnation, nothing is dammed up and getting stagnated and putrefying. And there really is this direct correlation, this one-to-one ratio between our hydration and our prana, our mana, our chi. So if there's stagnation of water in the body, then you get stagnation of chi as well. And according to, you know, Chinese medicine, stagnation of chi is at the heart of all diseases in the body. And it's, you know, they're two sides of the same coin. They're two words for the same phenomenon, because the measurement that we use to measure hydration is the same measurement that we use to measure how much electricity, how much hydroelectric energy, how much literal prana, mana, chi, electromagnetism your cell membranes can draw across. It's called a phase angle test. So your level of hydration is directly proportional to your level of life force energy, because guess what channels electrical energy in the body? It's water. That is the channel for it. It's the master conductor of that. So we want to make sure that that water is flowing. That's one of the main aspects of hydration. Another one of the main aspects of hydration that people don't usually think about is that demineralization is actually a type of dehydration. And we have basically epidemic levels of mineral deficiency in the world right now, partially because for the past 150 years, if not more, our soil and our food supply has been getting depleted of its mineralogy, but also because we no longer drink spring water, as all of our ancestors did for hundreds of thousands of years. And natural spring water is a well-rounded electrolyte supplement as well. So our body kind of expects to receive that from our water. And when people drink reverse osmosis or distilled water, not only does it not have the minerals in there, but it's an aggressive solvent that can strip the minerals from their bodies. So if you have any kind of mineral deficiencies, that's a type of dehydration. Another type of dehydration would be the destructuring of your internal waters, specifically your intracellular fluid. It was Dr. Zach Bush who said that if we could stay perfectly hydrated in the intracellular environment, our aging would slow down, if not reverse. And that intracellular hydration isn't just a matter of how much water the cell has, but specifically how structured that intracellular fluid is, because it's the structure of that water that makes that water so highly conductive and gives the cell its cellular voltage. In fact, the primary role of the mitochondria and the primary role of ATP is to generate highly structured de novo metabolic water and to structure our intracellular fluid. So that's what gives us that cellular voltage, that life force energy. And we see a direct correlation as people age or as they fall into various states of disease. 1-to-1 ratio, you see that their intracellular fluid loses its structure gradually. So the younger or the healthier or the more vibrant a person is, the stronger that crystallinity of the water molecules will be. And then another one of the main factors of dehydration that people don't consider, other than just not drinking enough water, is, okay, what kind of hydrogen is in that water? We all know that water is 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, but there are actually a lot of different isotopes of hydrogen. And this is far more important than most people realize, because the ratio of deuterium hydrogen to protium hydrogen on this planet has been gradually shifting way out of balance. And the surplus of deuterium in your drinking water, in the water that's in your food, and specifically in your bio water, has been associated with everything from brain fog and fatigue to moodiness and anxiety and depression and cancer and metabolic disorders and diabetes and cardiovascular issues. Basically, once again, where you find too much deuterium, you find intracellular crowding, less structure in that water, and higher proclivity towards disease.
And what is deuterium? Where does it come from?
So deuterium is a type of hydrogen that just has an extra neutron on it. So it's called heavy hydrogen. Okay. Normal hydrogen, which is protium hydrogen, is 1 proton and 1 electron. And it is the most magical little atom in the universe. And when it comes together to form molecular hydrogen, it's literally what fuels our bodies. A lot of people say that the only reason why we get thirsty and need to drink water is not because we need the water, but actually because we need the hydrogen. Hydrogen is the fuel of life. It is the powerhouse of the universe, like not just on this micro scale of our bodies and our planet, but also what's literally fueling the entire universe. It's the most abundant thing in the universe. And it's the first thing that comes out of the ether, the first thing that is born of that ocean of pure orgone energy that Wilhelm Reich talked about. The moment that crystallizes into physical form, it forms the smallest atom, the first element on the periodic table, and the thing that everything else emerges out of if given enough time. So really looking at this isotopic ratio of hydrogen is, I think, one of the most important aspects of hydration. It's usually the last one that people get to when they start their hydration journey, which is okay. Start simple, start where you're at, but it's definitely an important one. And then the very last one that I'll mention, the very last thing that constitutes hydration, is the spectrum of light frequencies that's in your water. So most people don't realize that one of the primary roles of water, and its dharma on this planet, is to translate light energy into biological effects. And in fact, it's been said that light itself is just a bundle of energy that has to be brought in and translated by the right kind of water. And different kinds of water, mostly based on their molecular structure, on their crystallinity, have different capacities to channel and interpret light frequencies into life force energy. Just like if you have a pane of shattered glass, it's going to translate light flowing through it very differently than if you have a crystal prism that's going to create rainbows with it, right? And yet most of the water that people drink, and as we age and we get less and less healthy, the water that we're made of as well is less crystalline, and therefore does not absorb, store, receive, translate, or conduct or transduce those light frequencies. And this is such a crucial part of being alive, is being able to make use of the sun energy and the moon energy and all of the light frequencies that we're always exposed to. They're like the palette of colors that with which water paints the entire masterpiece of our vitality and our bodily functioning and our circadian rhythms and all these things. So that's the final aspect of hydration, is okay, how much energy and what kinds of vibrational frequencies, patterns, signatures, and light spectra does the water have on board?
Oh, nice. And when you're talking about structured or crystalline water, this is like that fourth phase of water, correct?
Yeah, so it's been called the fourth phase of water. Dr. Gerald Pollack has a book by that name. Technically, it's not a phase, though. It's an allotrope. So the fourth phase of anything is the plasma phase, and plasma water is also pretty magical, but it's an allotrope, meaning it's still liquid, but it's slightly more gel-like because it has a different structure. It has a different form. Allotropic differences are differences in structure.
Okay, that's fascinating. And I think I've seen too in recent times studies where they've actually been starting to image in some way, shape, or form the meridians in the body, and discovering that they're like these rivers of structured water in the body that we don't have vessels for specifically. Super interesting stuff.
It's fascinating. I think they're called bongan limes. I'm pretty sure it's bongan. And yeah, Dr. Mae Wan Ho didn't necessarily use that exact terminology, but I think she's probably my favorite hydrobiophysicist when it comes to all things structured water in the body, in terms of the quantum capacity of these lines of energy that you're talking about, to be able to transfer information throughout the body literally faster than the speed of light at a quantum scale. It's called quantum coherence. Mae Wan Ho said that at the molecular level, we are so incredibly crystalline that we're basically these quantum crystal beings. I know that sounds like the most woo-woo new agey thing ever come out. But this is coming from a biophysicist, and it's so true, because water, again, it has that capacity to be the bridge between the physical and the non-physical realms. In the 3D world, we're basically very limited by the speed of light, whatever you want to, there's a lot of different theories in physics, but basically speaking, the speed of light is the fastest speed possible here in the third dimension. And yet, if you have water that is coherently structured and crystalline enough, it can translate or transfer information faster than the speed of light, which means that it's literally bridging other realms. It's crossing into other dimensions in order to do so. So in many, many ways, of which that is just one, water defies the laws of physics. Water shocks physicists again and again. There are over 64 anomalies about water that physicists just write off as utter anomalies, utter mysteries. No one knows how or why water is able to function the way that it does, unlike any other substance, is able to but she's the one and only channel and purveyor and medium of life. And so she would have to break all the rules in order to do that, right?
Of course she would. I've heard you talk about hydrogen bonds and levitation before. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so hydrogen is considered the more levitational element, and oxygen is the more gravitational element of the pairing. And so we have this perfect balance between the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang, the gravity and the levity. And at this point in human history, we've really pretty much mastered gravity, right? But we've barely tapped into the potentials of levity. So there were well, I think one of my favorite researchers into this topic was Victor Schauberger, who was so fascinated by the levitational properties of water, how water can rise from the depth of an aquifer all the way up to the heights of the tallest mountain spring, or how water can rise as sap in a tree all the way from the bottom of its roots to the top of its foliage. Water has these amazing levitational properties, and he realized that was mostly driven by the hydrogen. And we see this during processes of electrolysis as well, which I don't recommend. I'm not recommending anyone electrolyze their drinking water. But when you do, you see that the oxygen falls to the bottom and the hydrogen rises to the top. It's very levitational in nature. And Victor Schauberger took advantage of this property by utilizing vortexing, water vortexing, to create a levitational device that he called the ripple scene. And those his patents were basically confiscated by the Nazis in World War II, and so no one has direct access to what he was able to create, but he did create some levitational devices back then.
Oh wow, that's fascinating. And you're talking about the vortexing. When we see water in nature, it flows in a very different way than what we might imagine in like a municipal water supply. Why is that difference significant?
That's such a good question. And if every hydrologist asked this question, then humanity wouldn't be in half the trouble that it's in right now, to be honest. So water in nature is always spiraling, is always vortexing. When you look at a natural river, the water isn't just flowing in a straight line, she's actually turning. And with every time the stream meanders and switches direction, so does the vortex of the water. It also switches direction. And so, the linear Western mind, we tend to think that the shortest distance between point A and point B is a straight line. And so we've artificially rerouted all of the world's major rivers and many of its minor rivers to just form straight lines, because that's easier for us for shipping and for laying out infrastructure and roads and all this other stuff. And we have to make nature fit our paradigm, right?
Right.
But what happens is that not only does the water actually move slower, but it builds up sediment. It starts to stagnate. It starts to putrefy. All of the pH balance goes off. The bacteria become incredibly imbalanced, and so that water is gradually dying. It's gradually becoming more and more comatose and just sick the more that we do that. And it causes more erosion, it causes more flooding of the banks. Quite a lot of flooding is caused by this. Whereas if we allow water to take her natural route, water loves to dance, she loves to move. As she spirals, she kicks up the sediment from the bottom of the river floor that actually comes up and feeds all of the vegetation and all of the life and all of the fish on the top. And when she gets too warm at the top of the stream, she cycles back down to the bottom of the stream to cool off again. So she has this natural temperature regulation that happens. She has this natural way of cleaning herself and making sure that she's always staying healthy and clean. And then also, when water flows in a spiral, it experiences less resistance as the velocity is increased. And what this means is that if a vortex is going fast enough, it can get down to less than zero resistance. In other words, it's generating energy. Vortexes generate energy. They draw in energy from the etheric field. if anyone is curious to learn more about this phenomenon, there's a book called Vortex, The Key to Future Science, that discusses the way in which everything in the universe is always vortexing, right? And that's how we draw energy into this dimension, whether we're talking about the atomic level, which every atom is basically just a toroid of, double inwinding vortexes, or we're talking about, the scale of galaxies, or, the toroid of this planetary plane. So at any scale, the universe moves the way that water moves, because physicists measure the universe in terms of a superfluid. When you're measuring how things move on a subatomic scale, you measure them in terms of superfluid, which is a water that never runs out of energy. If you're measuring, macrocosmic phenomena, again, they're measured in terms of a superfluid. Dark matter and dark energy move as superfluids, and they are kind of what give form and shape and movement to everything in the universe. And they're very much liquid in nature. And in fact, there's a new theory in physics, we call it cosmology. Instead of calling them dark matter and dark energy, they're just calling them dark fluid now, as one main fluid that fills everything. Like, this is very much a watery universe, and you cannot separate water from movement. There was an author named M.J. Pangman who described this really well in her book Dancing with Water, that the minute you separate water from movement, you've separated it from its identity. Water in nature is never stagnant. Even if you see a placid lake and it seems to be still, there are still subtle temperature and pressure gradients and variations that are creating, minor flows in that lake, and there's the evaporation that's happening. Even glaciers move at a very slow pace, and they're always slightly evaporating and slightly refreezing and slightly melting, and there's this whole process. So water has to be allowed the freedom and the autonomy to move in the way that she does, because that's what gives life to everything in the universe, and especially everything on this earth, in the same way that the movement of your biowater gives you life. Our water, our blood doesn't just flow through our veins in a straight line. It actually spirals through our veins. We have these spiral striations on the inside of our veins that are what allow that water to have its momentum, because again, as the velocity is increased, the pressure is decreased, or rather the resistance is decreased. So our heart as a muscle doesn't have enough strength to actually pump the blood all the way through the body. It's not strong enough for that. What it does is it acts as a vortex. If you were to unwind the muscle of the heart, it's literally just one long muscle wrapped in on itself like a giant spiral. And it gives the heart enough of an impulse of energy with every beat that it flows into these spirally striated veins. And because they have spirals on the inside of them, the water has more momentum, and it has more power, and it has more vitality, and it has more flow. The same is true with your cerebral spinal fluid and your spinal column. The German word for spinal column is spiral column, and the word for vertebrae is vortices. And your CSF is always spinning and spiraling and vortexing up and down, which gives it so much energy and so much vitality. Everything in the body is spiraling. The next time you go pee, maybe look down at your urethra, you'll notice that even your pee comes out in a spiral. Everything in the universe is spiraling, and water has to be given the freedom and the autonomy to do this, so that she can fulfill her dharma as the conveyor of life.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I always say to look to babies, indigenous people, and animals, especially wild animals, if we want to know our true nature and our instincts. And I have a cat who, she will not drink stagnant water out of a bowl. She will go sit in the bathtub until you turn the faucet on, because she's so instinctually in tune, and even, dogs that wait for the toilet to be flushed. There's something that they understand there that we've disconnected ourselves from, unfortunately. So, can you talk a little bit more about spring water? 'Cause most of us don't have direct access to it, or we're not in a great location. I know I've looked up my locations, and unfortunately there's not anything close by other than an artesian well that's in the middle of a commercial farming operation. But what is it specifically about spring water that's different than how most of us are actually getting our water?
Well, Spring water is definitely the most ideal water for us to be drinking, without a doubt. I think there's just something that we know, even on a subconscious cellular level, just on an instinctual level. We know that spring water is the best water. That's why so many of these companies will label their bottled water products as being spring water, even when they're not, even when they're just pumped up from a well. You know, the industry lobbied to have the laws changed, so now they can label well water as spring water. Which is kind of ridiculous, but we're among one of the first generations in history that has not been predominantly drinking from springs. And even more concerning, we're actually largely not even drinking water from our own watershed at all. In most cases, you know, unless you have a well, most people are drinking water that is either plumbed in from elsewhere, diverted from other watersheds, or has been, you know, bottled from Fiji or Evian, France, or somewhere in the Alps, or, you know, wherever it is. We're making our bio water from very disconnected, kind of scattered, disparate sources. And there's a really beautiful grounding synergy that happens when you start to make yourself of the water in the place where you live, and you really physiologically weave yourself into that watershed. And there's something even more special that happens when you are the one to personally go on that pilgrimage to harvest liquid life force itself as it is being born at a spring. Because this is the most direct communion with the heart of nature and the birthplace of this God force energy that we get to have. You know, springs have been held as sacred places, as temples in nature, since even before we were Homo sapiens. You know, there's evidence of a reverence of springs dating all the way back to the Bronze Age. And
did you know that 99% of the molecules in your body are water, and the quality of that water determines the quality of your life? Water is so much more than just its molecular structure of hydrogen and oxygen. Water is life. And the energetic properties of water are some of the most overlooked and misunderstood principles in the understanding of life. Water is much like a radio receiver. Adjusting the crystalline structure of the water, it can be balanced to receive the optimum spectrum of electromagnetic frequencies. Quantum physics is very clear on the fact that everything in the universe is interconnected. Our ability to perceive the information coming to us is crucial for creating the highest possible level of life for ourselves and our planet. Since 99% of our molecules are water, our ability to perceive must lie in the water itself. The crystalline structure that the analemma water wand creates in the water enables your body to become a better radio receiver. It opens up the pathways to make your body more conscious, more connected, more in tune with the harmonic rhythms of nature. Analemma has been shown to increase cellular energy, revitalize the immune system, boost anti-inflammatory pathways, and improve gut health. The analemma wand brings the water we drink into a state of coherence. Holistic health exists in a paradigm outside of the limiting confines of allopathic Western medicine. When we consider the subtle energy system of the body, we begin to see that reversing states of dis-ease is simply about following the laws of nature and giving the body the resources it requires so it can return to a state of homeostasis. Analemma water is a simple tool in that path back to balance. Coherence equals consciousness. That's why we call analemma water conscious water. Grab your own analemma water wand by visiting the Jen's Favorite Things tab at jenmayo.com and use code JEN10 for 10% off your purchase.
there's a very good reason for this, because that is the most pristine, vibrant, vital, living, well-balanced water that we can get our hands on. You know, in most cases, that water has been underground in an aquifer for at minimum decades, and sometimes as much as many thousands of years. So as water seeps its way down into the aquifer, it encounters many, many, many filtration layers of geology. And so it gets filtered by the soil and the roots and the fungi in the soil are filtering it. And then it's a layer of clay, and we know that clay is detoxifying. That's why we put it on our face masks, and we, practice geophagy and these different things. And then it'll hit a layer of carbon deposits, and we know that carbon is detoxifying. That's why we use carbon filters and a lot of different filtration systems. And so it hits all of these different layers, and then it gestates underground in the womb of the earth for, again, anywhere from decades to thousands of years, where it's exposed to the geomagnetic rock formations that give it more molecular structure and more magnetism. H2O is a dipolar molecule, so it has a north pole and a south pole, and part of structuring water is making sure all of those poles are lined up and coherent and cohesive. And then when it rises to a spring through these levitational properties of hydrogen and the vortex of lunar gravity, it is born right at its moment of perfect ripeness. And it has a full range of electrolytes and minerals, which again, we need supplementally. It has all of the microorganisms, the beneficial microorganisms that are present at springs. So natural spring water is actually a probiotic supplement. And again, our biology expects this of us. Our biology expects us to drink at minimum spring water, because that's what we've been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. Right. Springs have been tended to. Springs have been kept sacred for hundreds of thousands of years. And the reason why they're less common now is because people have fallen out of the practice of honoring and tending to them, of building the well houses and the spring houses, of keeping them free of debris and sediment, and tending to them through the seasons. They do take a little bit of upkeep if you have a spring on your land. And even just our grandparents and our great-grandparents, they knew this, and they left us this legacy, this incredible treasure, this beautiful inheritance of many, 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 many thousands of springs all over the world, and we've basically in 1 or 2 generations squandered that. So for anybody who wants to take on this practice of stewarding a spring, or at the very least, harvesting your water from a spring, there's a website called findaspring.com that I recommend really highly. I'm sure that's probably the one that you checked out when you looked.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. And it varies from region to region. You'll go to some areas and there's tons, and you just have like a gluttony of options to choose from. And then other places you might have to trek for a while. I've lived in places where I've had to drive over an hour and hike a bit to get to the spring. But as I said, it really is a pilgrimage, and there's no better reclamation of your sanguine sovereignty, literally the sovereignty of your own blood, than receiving your bloodstream in direct communion with Mother Earth, because we've created all of these surrogate stand-ins in between ourselves and the source. In fact, in French, the word for spring is the source. It is literally our source. It's our source of life. And we have these stand-ins now. So when you drink water, it becomes your blood within 5 minutes. So when you're holding your cup of water in your hand, just recognize, wow, this is my external bloodstream. Mm-hmm. It's going to be my internal bloodstream in a moment. And then it'll go back into the watershed again and become my external bloodstream again. But we all share one bloodstream called water, whether we're calling it a river, or we're calling it a water tower, or we're calling it our blood. It's all the same water in different phases and forms and functions, right? And so if you are paying the government for your bloodstream by drinking municipal tap water, that is a very covert form of just energetic sanguine disempowerment. And if you are paying corporations for your bloodstream by purchasing your water in plastic bottles, again, that is a slight form of disempowerment that is very new in the human experience. Mm-hmm. And there's something that I've seen not only in myself, but in friends and with clients that I've worked with, that there's this energetic and spiritual empowerment that happens that's kind of hard to put your finger on, but there's just the sense of self, the sense of direction, the sense of belonging, the sense of humanness in some way that just comes back when you start taking on this practice. And normally it's not the reason why you do the prep. You do it for the health benefits, and you do it for because you want to go for a hike, and you do it because that's the most hydrating water to drink, or maybe you do it as a spiritual practice, to lay offerings and offer songs and prayers at the spring head. But then the downstream effects of what you notice is such an incredible empowerment.
Oh, wow. One of my favorite expressions, in health and wellness in general, and it's fitting for this conversation, is that you can't towel off while you're standing in the shower. And I think that we've so come to a place where we consider medicine as something external that somebody else imparts on us as a physical substance, when so many of the things that would make us well are just removing toxic elements from our environment. And I think water is probably the best place to start with our understanding of that, is that water is medicine, and it's not just this chemical H2O that we need to survive. But it has so many medicinal properties when we consume it and are in communion with it in the way that it was intended. Can you kind of expand a little bit on, water is almost a starting place for its medicinal values?
Absolutely. Right now, where we're at in our culture is the exact opposite. Water, it's a poison. It's being used as, and I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist here, but I am. So
right. We can get our tinfoil hats out. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not even, it's not even that crazy to say. I think anybody who is really looking at what they're putting into tap water in the major cities now can see that it's being used as a weapon of war. A very covert, subtle level of warfare is taking place just in the type of water that we're drinking. And this isn't something new. It's actually been used in prison camps, throughout Russia and throughout Germany. They would put certain things in the water supply to create a more docile population. And that was where it began. And it's expanded all throughout the West now, unfortunately, in major cities where there are neurotoxins, there are biocides, there are endocrine disruptors. So specifically, like, fluoride is classified as a neurotoxin, right? So it calcifies the soft tissues and glands and cartilage in your body. Particularly, it encrusts the pineal gland with a substance that's harder than calcium, not just the pineal, but other glands as well. The thyroid, the cartilage, it's been linked to arthritis. It's been linked to inhibitions in brain development in children. It's been linked to lower IQs. It's carcinogenic as a proximal effect because it inhibits cell-to-cell signaling by lowering the cellular voltage. So many things. Then, of course, you have biocides like chlorine and chloramine, which create this little mini genocide of your internal ecosystem every time you drink it. So not only are we not drinking spring water that should be a probiotic, but we're actually drinking water that does the opposite and kills off all of our internal bacteria, which are crucial to not just our well-being, but also our mood as well. A vast majority of serotonin that you produce is actually generated in the gut, and not only serotonin, but many other neurotransmitters that are required for proper cognitive function, for focus, for clarity, even for, compassion and empathy and connection. There's this one microbiologist who said that we basically have an unregulated gut. We basically have an unregulated pharmaceutical factory in our guts, because all of our internal microbiota, they're generating all of these neurotransmitters and all of these hormones all the time that play such a role in our whole state of being and the way that we perceive the world. So if we are suffering from a depletion of the microbiome, which again is at epidemic levels right now, like microbiome depletion is so rampant right now largely for this reason. And then there's just a cascade of other downstream effects from that cause you to think that you then need actual pharmaceuticals to make up for the chemicals that your gut microbiome can't produce in that case. Right. And so what happens when you take all of these pharmaceuticals and you're living in one of these cities? Well, you pee them out and they go right back into the external bloodstream. They go right back into the water supply, and then other people drink them and it goes into their bloodstream. And what is urine anyways? It's just filtered blood plasma with urea and proteins. And so when you drink this water that has been peed out by other people and contains all of these pharmaceuticals, there were about 70 pharmaceuticals found in the water supply in major cities, places like LA, New York, Chicago. It's because people are peeing them out and they're not getting filtered out, and they have a closed loop toilet to tap plumbing infrastructure in those cities. And it is this really strange vampiric paradigm where people are like drinking each other's, I don't even want to get into it. People can use their imaginations, but it's really concerning, because these pharmaceuticals have been tested to some extent. I mean, I don't know how much you trust FDA testing. I don't really trust it that much, but they have been quote unquote tested to some extent, one at a time. But there's absolutely no data on what happens when you take 50 to 60 of them at a time in minute submicron subclinical doses, right? And it's really wreaking havoc. Another one of the main ones that's in tap water is atrazine. And atrazine is a major hormone disruptor. And it's been known to cause, male fish to turn into female fish, male frogs to turn into female frogs in the wild. And it's rampant in the waterways. So long story short, right now, water is being used as a poison. That's not even to say anything of the vibrational poisons that are in the water. Water is exquisitely sensitive to all frequencies and stimuli, auditory frequencies, vibrational frequencies, visual frequencies, you name it. And a lot of places in the country now, these water towers have 5G towers on the water tower, which is extremely concerning. And so there's the vibrational pollution that's getting into the water as well. Basically, the water that we drink is highly traumatized. Mm-hmm. All of the pumps and the right angles and the pipes and everything that it goes through. There's even like toxic greases and lubricants in the water from the greases and lubricants that they have to put onto the pumps that push the water through the pipes. And it's so archaic and backwards and like 180 degrees from what we could be doing with water, which is, creating not only a medicinal water supply, but, if you have pipes with spiral striations on them, that if they're designed in the right way, like we said before, water, when it's flowing in a spiral, generates energy. So you could actually power a city's entire electrical grid just from the energy generated by water flowing in a spiral, rather than having to use electricity to pump the water through. Just the flow of the water itself will be generating enough hydroelectric energy to power an entire city. That's a tangent. That's a total side tangent from your question.
No, that's amazing though.
It's incredible. I mean, so much is possible with water. Free energy is possible with water. Infinite miraculous healings are possible with water. There's no end to what the source of life is ready to generously give us and help us step into when we become the conscious water bearers that I believe we're stepping into in the age of Aquarius. But it really takes shifting 180 degrees from water being a poison to water being a medicine, right? From water being a commodity and a resource to water being a commons and the source. And when we start seeing water in that way, we start seeing her as a medicine, at the bare minimum, we'll start mimicking what happens at a spring to bring, whether it's tap water or reverse osmosis or, polluted lake water, whatever it is, we'll learn from nature and mimic nature to bring water back to its spring quality state. So the steps that I teach about how to do that are filter, structure, balance, and energize. And I have a course called Navigating the Waters that goes over all of those steps, all the tools, how to do them for free, how to do them, more conveniently, all of the options there. But what's really cool is there are some, so that will bring it back to like a normal spring, right? But there are some springs around the world that are very unique in that they are miracle springs. They've been called miracle springs. Mm-hmm. These uniquely healing springs where pilgrims will travel thousands of miles and literally be cured of various illnesses. Magic Johnson was cured of his AIDS by visiting a spring in Tlacote, Mexico. There's another spring in Adana, India that has cured people of all kinds of cardiovascular issues. There's the Lourdes spring in France at Bernadette's Grotto that there have been thousands of anecdotal cases of miracle healings there. And then I think 60 or 62 of them were actually studied. And, many scientists and doctors came in and they tried to figure out, okay, what actually happened here? And they all threw up their hands and they said, this is an officially Vatican sanctioned miracle healing. And so, water does have the capacity to be incredibly curative when we understand her love languages and give her what she needs. She needs, one of the things that all of these springs have in common is really high levels of atomic and molecular hydrogen. So kind of getting back to where our conversation started, that hydrogen is this very incredibly energy rich magical molecule. The more protein hydrogen is in the water, the more its capacity to have some of these healing properties. There's also water that has been specifically depleted of deuterium. So rather than water that's had excess protein added to it, which we call hydrogen enriched water, there's water that specifically has had its deuterium lowered, and that's called light water or deuterium depleted water. And that's actually approved as a cancer medication in some places in the I think in Hungary. Currently only for veterinary use, but of course it's used off label for humans all the time.
Yeah.
And then, there's double helix water, which is also an incredible form of water that was discovered by David Gann and Yin Lo, I think his name is. These two doctors who basically discovered under an atomic force microscope, which it cost them $10,000 an hour to rent. And they had to look for many, many, many hours at water samples to figure out what was going on. These miraculous results that they were noticing from certain kinds of water. And they were like, we have to get to the bottom of this. It must be something subatomic. And they eventually found it. They found that 100 nanometer cells of pure water will gather together in these double helix spirals. And that is probably the origin of DNA, because water forms the backbone of your DNA. The only reason your DNA is supposedly in a spiral is because it has this highly coherent spiraled water that it forms around the backbone. And so when you start working with double helix water, it's also believed that double helix water is why homeopathy is effective at all, because it has more double helixes in there. And then if you know how to create double helix water, you can make homeopathy a lot more effective as well. So there's that kind of water. There's also infoceutical water, which is where you can create homeopathic remedies at home using any kind of vibration. There's full spectrum light infused water, things like analemma can help infuse your water with light. And we're finding from those studies that not only can it restore the gut microbiome and the microbiome of the soil, but it can even do things like create brainwave coherence within 3 minutes of drinking the water. It can reverse the biological aging. So there's a particular test that they do for biological age called the glycan test. And of course, we're all going to age chronologically. None of us are getting out of that. Right. But our biological aging can be slowed down and even reversed in some ways. So within 99% of the course participants, the case study participants that did this trial with this particular kind of water, 99% of them experienced 1 to 12 years of biological age revitalization within only 3 months of drinking the water. So there are many, and this isn't even all the different kinds of water. I'm spacing out on some of them right now. This is just a handful. There's so many medicinal kinds of water. Like it really is nature's medicine.
Whenever we hear euphemisms, I always think, what are the origins of that? And certainly the fountain of youth came from somewhere, right?
Yes.
We're not talking about the apple of youth or the
exactly.
We're specifically talking about water, and there was some sort of wisdom that came from.
Absolutely. And it's all over scripture too, you know. I feel like all of our ancestors have pointed through this, whether it's through, you know, ancient symbols like the fountain of youth, which I really don't think to be a symbol. I think that there were places in the world where people did live an incredibly long time, like up in for example, the Hunza region of Pakistan. You know, not only did people regularly live to be centenarians, but it was at one point in time, it was not uncommon for women to give birth over the age of 100 in that area. And so for generations, anthropologists were going there thinking that this was Shangri-La, trying to figure out what is their secret, what is their diet, what are their practices. And I'm sure it all plays a factor, but they typically told these anthropologists, oh, it's the water that we drink. And so finally, Dr. Patrick Flanagan went there. Actually, I think it was Dr. Henry Kawanda who went there first and studied their water. And then his protege, Dr. Patrick Flanagan, continued his work. Between the two of them, they studied this water for 60 years.
Oh my
And they
gosh.
they discovered a lot of really unique factors in this particular water that they were like, okay, this actually makes a lot of sense how this could be the fountain of youth. In fact, one of the things that they found that we later discovered, you know, after Flanagan's time, we later discovered this does relate directly to its level of deuterium. But what they found was that the length of the lifespan of people living in a certain area is directly proportional to the length of the lifespan of the snowflakes in that area. And what I mean by that is that snowflakes actually have a circulatory system, just like we do. They're little bodies of water, just like we are. And so, you know, when water freezes or crystallizes into a snowflake, it doesn't all freeze at the same rate. And there's some water within the snowflake that freezes much more slowly. And they called this anomalous water. And that water that freezes more slowly is kind of stays alive and flows within the arms and the branches of that snowflake, the circulatory system. And by the time the snowflake completely freezes over, then they considered it dead. I would say maybe just like cryogenically frozen because it can melt and come back to life. But the longer that circulatory system flows within the snowflake, the longer the people of that region will live. Well, what we later discovered down the line is that depending on the amount of deuterium in the water will freeze at different rates. So it makes perfect sense that, you know, if their snowflakes lived longer, it was because there was much less deuterium in their water. In addition to, they also had some very unique kind of silicate colloids and these little clathrate organophide silica that was in there that made their water kind of cloudy and highly structured because it acted as kind of a magnet to like pull the molecules together in a very structured way. So their water was super medicinal in a lot of different ways. And there are so many ways for water to be medicinal that it's amazing that, you know, even magnetized water has been used on so many different farms for generations now. And in Israel, it's been used just with incredible benefits. It's actually more effective to give a cow magnetized water than it is to give a cow RGBH in terms of its production of milk, how long it can continue to produce milk, its hormonal vitality and that sort of thing. And then you're not, of course, getting RGBH into the, you know, the systems of the people who drink that milk. Instead, they're just getting magnetized water. There are so many, and that's not even getting into like chromatography and how different specific colors will impact water's ability to deliver certain medicinal benefits. Like it just, there's so much when we start going down the rabbit hole of water being medicinal that we've really only just scratched the meniscus of this field of study. And it's still shocking to me sometimes that it's not just like a household understanding, but hopefully we're shifting that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a shift happening. It's not quite made it all the way into the mainstream, but certainly there are pockets of us in the, you know, I'm going to call it the biohacking community who are starting to have awareness about how important this is. And I will say, even just for myself, it's been an incremental process to get there, you know, kind of back to the animals, indigenous people and babies phenomenon of them being much more instinctual. I remember when my son was very young, he's 15 now, but when he was very young, he was so particular about water, even bottled water. There were certain bottled waters he would drink, and there were ones he wasn't. And he had a palate or an intuitive knowing about them that I didn't understand. But, if he needed a certain type of water to fall asleep at night, I wasn't going to argue with him. So, he was certainly intuitively onto something that I wasn't quite there yet, and that's been a process of, first learning how to filter water, because most of us think a Brita water filter at the grocery store is going to be adequate
Yeah.
to filter our water. It might make it smell and taste a little bit better, but it's not really doing very much. Um, but to the evolution, I'm at the point where I have a very good hydrogen generator at home and an analemma wand. And I know you and I both use infopathy, and I had Anton Fedorenko on the podcast previously. Fascinating stuff once we start to understand that water isn't just this chemical agent, that it's a conduit for information. And learning the nuances of that and the potential of it, you're a wealth of knowledge in that area, obviously, but I encourage people to just lean into their own curiosity. And wherever you have an intuitive sense, just lean more into that, because I think we've, just by nature of going indoors, we've lost a connection to the earth, and those instincts that, animals and indigenous and even babies have. It's so fascinating, and I appreciate all the information you bring to this space. So in terms of water and information and frequency, you mentioned briefly earlier them putting like 5G towers on top of water towers. What can you tell us about the nature of non-native EMF frequencies and how that impacts our bodies and our water?
Yeah, so this I think is a really interesting topic because it affects all of us, and it's kind of it has a lot of different effects on water. So one of the things that they're finding is that all of these cell towers are actually affecting the water in clouds. And clouds are not just there to look pretty and carry water from one place to another. They have other functions as well, like carrying information, vibratory information from one place to another. And they are these very diverse microbiomes in and of themselves. Like clouds have tons of microorganisms within them, sometimes literal tons. Like you might see a cloud and think it looks very fluffy and lightweight, but it could actually weigh tons of water. It's incredible to me to think of that. But so the clouds are actually getting irradiated by these frequencies. In fact, Dolph Santica and his team have been doing a lot of research into this. And so it's not only a matter of the fact that they start to carry the frequencies of these non-native signals that have no therapeutic benefit and sometimes detrimental effect on physiological systems, because they're not biocompatible. They don't come from the physiological system of the earth, right? And so they're disharmonious. They're just not. And if you're a musician, you'll understand if somebody's playing a frequency that's just out of harmony, you don't want that in your symphony. You have to tune it up, but nobody is tuning these towers to a bioresonant frequency. And so we just have this disharmony in the symphony that is always playing in nature, the unheard symphony that we are meant to resonate in tune with. So not only is the water picking up on those frequencies, but it's also disallowed from translating the frequencies of nature and of the cosmos into our bodies and biological systems as well. So Theodor Schwenk was one of my favorite water researchers, and he showed through his work, and others have as well. I think the whole practice of spagyrics is largely based on this principle that water responds intimately to the movements of the stars and the patterns of the planets and the phases of the moon and the exact position of the sun. And, if Mercury is making a trine to Jupiter, water knows that, right? And I know this sounds kind of woo, but again, Schwenk proved it in his studies, and there have been numerous indigenous people who knew this as well. In fact, I lived in Bali studying with water priests for over a year, and And they have a practice there where they go and they harvest from all of the springs. They've had this practice for hundreds, if not thousands of years. They harvest from all the springs, and they leave the water in open containers with no lid. And the priests will go in this procession all around the country that can take a week or two at a time to hit all the specific springs that they need to gather water from for this particular ritual. And the water is not allowed to be disconnected from the sky at any point in time. The trucks cannot even drive under a bridge.
Oh, wow.
They can't even drive under a bridge because they want this water to be in perfect sync and communion with the heavenly bodies and with the celestial dance. And so there is this celestial symphony that is happening in the heavens, and we are meant to be choreographed into that and to be informed of it at a cellular level. We are meant to be woven into the tapestry of all of existence, and it's water that does that. It's water that translates that into our bodies. But when water is being blocked from receiving those signals, and instead it filled with noise, just static noise instead, then we're actually being disconnected from our higher knowing, right? From our higher wisdom, from the information that should be flowing through us from the celestial realms. And so that's one aspect of what non-native frequencies do. They also can completely destroy the structural integrity, the coherence, the molecular structure of water. So water cannot maintain its crystallinity in the presence of strong man-made EMFs unless it's been through very specific structuring processes that give it a lot of stability. Mm-hmm. So this is one of the main differences between the different kinds of water structures that are out there on the market. There's a lot of, subtle nuances between them, and I don't think the layperson cares to get into all of the details. But largely it's true. You do get what you pay for in this field, and it's like there are some that create a kind of water that has a very high level of resilience, of structural resilience, where they've done studies that if water has been structured in a certain way, it can even sit next to a Wi-Fi router for quite a while and not lose its structure. Whereas most water, you definitely want to keep it away from your Wi-Fi routers. And that's the reason why EMFs have the damaging effect that they have on our bodies as well, because they cause our biowater to lose its structural integrity. And again, if you lose the structural integrity of your intracellular fluid, you cannot conduct that voltage. Like water is the conductor, so you don't have that cellular voltage available. And then also it can cause our gap junctions to resonate at the wrong frequency. It can cause our cell membranes to get out of phase and resonate at the wrong frequency. If that is the strongest environmental vibration in your environment, we're going to go in tune with whatever is the strongest signal that we are exposed to most often. If we're not getting out and grounding on the earth and connecting with the Schumann resonance often enough to offset that, or if you don't have some kind of infinity block or multi-wave oscillators or whatever your EMF strategy tools of choice, we're at a point now where we all have to take sovereignty over having some kind of strategy, because the only way we're able to absorb hydration in the first place is through the osmotic flow of water in and out of our cell membranes. And that's an electrical process. The ability of your cells to absorb water is directly proportional to their voltage. And so if they're resonating at a different frequency, you literally can't even draw the hydration across, no matter how high quality the water you're drinking is. Your cells have to be primed to receive it. They have to be at the right frequency to actually draw it in. So a big aspect of hydration is lifestyle factors and EMF strategy. And but the good news is that the more highly structured your biowater is, and the more it is coherently tuned to that full spectrum of light frequencies, and it's strong, it gives you a really good buffer against those fields as well. So if you're really well hydrated, you just have a lot more of a buffer to be a lot less affected by proximity to 5G and to Wi-Fi routers and things like that. Typically, the sensitivity to those signals is directly proportional to a person's level of hydration. Mm-hmm. So they can be dehydrating, but they're going to be even more dehydrating if you're already hydrated, if you're already dehydrated. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard you talk too about, if we teleported somebody from 500 years ago to present day, that they probably wouldn't even be able to survive the frequencies in our realm because their bodies haven't adapted.
Yeah, yeah. So that's total speculation,
Yeah, yeah. It
I don't know
makes
if you,
sense though.
it does. And um, there's a there's a book, I think it's called The Electric Universe, Slim Sperling,
Mhm.
or maybe it's Rainbow Body,
Oh,
something
yeah,
like
I know what you're
that.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I can send it to you, or we can put it in the show
Yeah,
notes or
I'll put it in
something.
the show notes if I find it.
Yeah, so that has a lot of really interesting kind of history of humanity's relationship with these non-native fields, and how they've affected us collectively, um, and how there's this phase of adaptation following the implementation of every massive signal that's being put out there. But then my friend Jonathan Butts also did a study that I think is pertinent to this as well, and he's one of the top water scientists out there. I have an enormous respect for his understanding of water, and he hasn't published the paper yet, but I had a chance to see it. And it's incredible because you can see that if water is exposed to a really strong degrading influence, like 5G, for example, as long as she's given a period of time to rest in between exposures,
Mhm.
then she adapts to that stimuli in really interesting ways. She'll actually refine her response to it every time she's re-exposed. She refines her response to it by the phi ratio, so that water might be receiving 5G, but then it's giving back 5G plus phi ratio. So she's turning harmful influences into more biologically compatible, more natural influences. She's literally evolving them. She evolves everything she gets her hands on.
Oh, wow.
Every vibrational signal, she has the capacity to evolve it. It's the only way that anything evolves on Earth is through the intelligence of water. And what's really groundbreaking about this is it shows that water is doing very complex mathematical equations. Water is just displaying this incredible level of intelligence and wisdom and grace and mercy, honestly. But she's only able to do this if and when she's given these periods of rest in between exposures where she can integrate what she's been
Right.
exposed to. And then in the process of resting and integration, she comes back more resilient again. And I think in the study, it was 25 hours of exposure and 1 hour off, I believe. Whereas if you just expose water continuously to a stimulus with no breaks, then she becomes very aggressive. And
Mhm.
actually, in some of the experiments that they did, she became so aggressive that energetically she sent a pulse of energy back through the machinery of the laboratory and almost exploded everything. And when the scientists told other scientists about that, and they were like, yeah, the water sent this pulse of it, like she just got pissed off and she sent this pulse of energy and it screwed with all of our like multi thousands of dollars equipment. Like our lab is screwed now. And the other scientists were like, that's not possible. Water can't do that. And John was basically like, well, then you don't know water, because she has a strong personality and she's actually the strongest thing on this planet. And she's not going to put up with bullshit. She's just not going to
Yeah.
put up with it.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Well, that certainly makes the case for turning all your devices off at night to give
Yeah,
your own internal waters a rest from frequencies. So
definitely.
that's encouraging, though. That's whole adaptation and resilience is
Mhm.
remarkable.
Yeah, the more
Um,
I learn about water, the more hope I have for the planet, for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about water and food? Because I know your background is originally in nutrition, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, originally I was studying nutrigenomics, which is
Okay.
how eating wild food actually helps us to express more of our wild genetic potential of our ancestral progenitors. And that when we eat more hybridized, domesticated food, we tend to be more docile, domesticated creatures. So there's definitely a lot of interest behind the agricultural big food, big ag kind of thing, rather than us going out and wildcrafting and foraging from nature, because just like when we wildcraft wild water, we wildcraft our food, we just become more sovereign, people.
Right.
So that's kind of where it started. And then I discovered the work of Victor Schauberger, fell in love with that, and went down this whole water path starting in 2009. And I still do think there's so much value in recognizing that you are what you eat. I think it's more true to say you are what you drink, or you are the information that is stored in the water of the food that you eat, whether that's genetic information stored in that water, or it's light frequencies that food received as it was growing, or it is the amount of deuterium in that water, or it is what the vibration of that food and its life force energy, which is conducted by its bio water, is communicating to your own biology. But there's a lot of ways that our diets really affect our level of hydration. So, for example, if you eat more fresh food, it's going to have lower levels of deuterium, and it's going to have a much higher amount of energy that gets translated directly into that cellular voltage that we were talking about. And remember, cellular voltage is directly proportional with your level of hydration. They're the two words for the same thing, or two measurements of the same phenomenon. You can't have one without the other, right? And then also, if you eat food that is higher in fat, your body is also going to produce more deuterium depleted metabolic water. So for every 100 grams of fat that you eat, high quality fats, of course, we're not talking about seed oils, but for every 100 grams of good fat that you eat, you produce about 110 grams of metabolic water, which is highly structured and deuterium depleted, versus if you eat 100 grams of carbs, I think it was something like 60 to 70 grams of metabolic water. 100 grams of protein is like 80 to 90 grams of metabolic water. So, the food is always informing our water bodies. If you eat food that's grown in the tropics, it's going to have a lot higher level of deuterium, whereas if you eat food that was grown closer to the poles, the deuterium levels are going to be lower. If you eat more animal foods and vegetables, you're going to have lower levels of deuterium than if you eat fruits. That's a much higher level of deuterium. Of course, if you eat fruits and vegetables, because they are biological, water-based beings, that water inside the fruits and vegetables is already structured. So, you're going to get more actual hydration by eating an apple or a cucumber, because it's structured water and it's in this very convenient, package that's going to be like a slower time release of that water into your system, and it's more ionically charged and all of that. You're going to absorb more of that than you would absorb by drinking a bottle of Dasani, because that water is just irrigating you. It's just going to flow right out of you again. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, there's a whole dietary protocol for hydration.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's fascinating stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we've barely scraped the surface here, that you have so much knowledge on water. It's fascinating to me. And I've looked over some of your courses online, and there's just a wealth of knowledge there. What do you have going on in terms of either online courses or in-person education that people who want to learn more might be able to draw from?
Yeah, so there's, like you said, there's a ton that's out there. I have a lot of free resources for people, free webinars at waterslife.academy and free videos on YouTube. And I put out a lot of stuff on Instagram. But if you really want to dive into the meat of the topic, waterslife.academy is where I have all of my courses. There's the one on drinking water, how to bring water back to its spring quality state, is a really quick 7-day course. I've had some people binge it all in one day, and it's called Navigating the Waters. And then there's one that is on your internal oceans, called Internal Oceans. It's on the biology of your inner waters and how to really optimize it internally. And then I have one called The Spirit of Water, which is all about the more esoteric and mystical teachings, the religious teachings, the indigenous teachings, the quantum physics, all of this. It is 18 hours worth of deep dive study into all of the mysteries of water. And actually, all of my courses are self-study, do at your own pace, but I'm about to host The Spirit of Water live again, which I hosted last year, and I'm going to do it again this year for 8 weeks, all through November and December. So if anybody wants to join that live, that's going to be a lot of fun. That'll be every Tuesday.
Okay.
And then, and in terms of in-person events, I'm really excited. We have another retreat coming up from January 31st to February 5th, which is going to be in Tulum in the Riviera Maya. And we're going to be swimming in cenotes and doing water ceremony and doing fire ceremony and doing underwater Janzu, aquatic bodywork, aquatic dance, of course, studying some of the mysteries of water, drinking the highest quality water, doing water alchemy practices, doing fascial release yoga, doing hydrotherapy like ice baths and things like that, all things water for 5 days and 4 nights together in Paris.
Oh, I love it. I love it. On that note, before we wrap up here, you did mention fascia. Can you talk a little bit about, that's one area where I'm so fascinated at how our body stores our experiences and information in the connective tissue of our body, and knowing more about water and its makeup with the fascia system. Can you expand a little bit on the importance of that?
Yeah, for sure. So fascia, I'm also fascinated by it.
Mhm.
I totally hear you. I'm on the same page. I can't get enough of fascia research.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. So it's sorry, it's 80% water, 20% protein, and it's some of the most highly structured water in your entire body. So it basically channels information through this water network. In fact, I don't know if you've seen the videos of it under a microscope, but it looks like this very wet gelatinous webbing, and you can actually see it delivering droplets of water along these beautiful crystalline gel-like web structures, because not only does it deliver information or energy or memory or experience, your whole somatic awareness of the world around you, and your fascia knows what's happening long before your conscious mind knows what's happening. It's this somatic, it carries the water of your fascia is the conduit of this somatic field of consciousness, right? And so its other primary role is as the irrigative network of your body, because your fascia is connected to every single cell, and it is what determines, far more so than your bloodstream, how much water is actually getting to each and every cell. And so, it delivers these water droplets to every cell in your body, making sure to irrigate and to nourish them all and hydrate them all. But when we are stagnant, then our biowater also gets stagnant and our fascia also gets stagnant. So it's this hydroelectric system. Sorry, I'm not hydroelectric. Well, it is hydroelectric, but it's also hydraulic. It's this hydraulic system in your body, and hydraulic means movement by water. So your fascia moves when you move. It needs that piezoelectric pressure, that squeeze and release, that twisting, that stretching, right, in order to get those water molecules where they need to go. So if any part of our body is still for too long, it starts to develop drought in that area, dehydration in that area, chronic inflammation or chronic pain in that area. Also, if we experience some kind of physical injury or physical trauma, and the energy or the memory of that, even an emotional trauma, even a psychological or even a subconscious trauma, can be stored in the fascia. And what we see when that happens is that particular area of fascia dries out. It no longer has that baptizing flow of water to just wash that energy system clean in that area. Instead of being like a wet, gushy sponge, it becomes like a dry, crackly, brittle sponge instead, right? And so you get these hard, dry knots, these drought-stricken areas of the body. And so when we start to comb out the fascial threads in that area, and we start to deliver water flow back to those areas, there can be a lot of stagnant energy or stagnant trauma released from those areas, as well, as it starts to become washed clean and it starts to become hydrated again.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, this has been fantastic. Where can people find you online if they do want to learn more?
You can find me on Instagram at Isabelle Friend. You can find my shop with all of the water tools and water alchemy practices and anything you could want to filter or structure your water. It's basically a curated list it's a curated directory of all of my top recommendations.
Okay.
Generally speaking, if it's not on there, I don't recommend it.
Okay.
It's waterislife.shop.
Okay.
Again, the school is at waterslife.academy. And if you want to find all of my free videos and stuff like that, they're all at Isabelle Friend on YouTube.
Okay, great. And one last question, because I think, this might be kind of the top thing for people who are new to this and don't know where to start. In terms of your water, I don't want to say filtration or treatment. I don't think that's quite correct, but protocol for enlivening or re-enlivening your water. Is there like one specific tool or system that you recommend most?
Yes, definitely. So you'll find on the site thousands of different things,
Mhm.
and they're all broken into the category of filter, structure, balance, or energize, because you want to
Okay.
hit each one of those steps. And I've been teaching those steps for years, and usually it was always like, oh, you want to get one tool for each, or there are some tools that can hit one or two or multiple at a time. But it was always a very manual process. And then about 2 years ago, I stumbled on the most amazing thing that is now my top recommendation. It's the only thing that does all of those steps. It's the only thing that filters, structures, balances, energizes, and suffuses the water with high therapeutic levels of molecular hydrogen without electrolysis.
Okay.
And it's called the Spring Aqua Wet 7.
Spring Aqua Wet 7. All right. I'm going to have to look that one up myself.
It basically just recreates, check it out. Yeah, it's amazing. It recreates the geology of the spring in Lourdes, France, right under your sink. So it's not a machine. It doesn't require electricity. It just literally is a recreation of the geology of a spring. It's like drinking spring water. It's like recreating spring water in your kitchen. I love it.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's amazing. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. I think our listeners will hopefully develop their own curiosity about water after this episode and go forth and help educate others on the importance of water, not just as a molecular substance, but something that can expand yourself physically and spiritually. So thank you so much again for joining us. And
so
I will include all those links in the show notes as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. This has really been a pleasure. And thank you to everybody who listened, and have a really beautiful day. Stay hydrated.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks so much. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Any statements and views expressed by myself or my guests are not medical advice. The opinions of guests are their own, and the Body Literacy Podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. If you have a medical problem, please consult a qualified and competent medical professional. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Body Literacy Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for updates over at jenmayo.com.